Xandra, and I'm going to be refuting Eric's claim of fact speech. In his speech, his major claim stated that illegal drugs in the United States have medicinal qualities. To back up his major claim, his secondary claim stated that the classifications of drugs is inaccurate. The following secondary claims stated were examples of different drugs that proved his first secondary claim. These drugs included cannabis, psychedelics, cocaine, and heroin. In Eric's speech, he brought up the issue that drugs are inaccurately classified to support his major claim. He used sufficient data by referencing the FDA legislation 8112 of the Controlled Substance Act, which is established in 1970. The scheduling of drugs, as referenced by Eric, classifies controlled substances into categories. These categories are based on how the drug has potential for abuse, whether it is an accepted medical use, and its safety. Eric discussed how Schedule I drugs have a potential for abuse and no acceptance for medical use and treatment. This information is misleading because it does not state that since 1970 there have been annual provisions to the Controlled Substance Act, which can be found in Title I of the Code of Federal Regulations. Within these provisions, drugs have been added and removed, therefore the law is constantly changing. According to Schedule I, drugs are not accepted for medical use under the United States law. This law does not state that drugs do not have a benefit to the body medically. It states the legality of the controlled substance and whether it is accepted in practice. The classifications of drugs under Title 21 is annually updated. Therefore, it is invalid for Eric to say the classification is inaccurate. The law does not state whether Schedule I drugs have benefit to the body. It is a means of prosecution under the law. To back up his supporting claim, Eric also mentioned research, according to David Nutt, about how legislation was made before modern scientific methods could prove the medical benefits of the controlled substance. Although this may seem plausible to prove that decisions made in 1970 were inaccurate, it fails to mention that the research was about the United Nations scheduling of legislation, not the United States. This contradicts his major claim because he is not discussing the United Nations. The argument is about illegal drugs in the United States. As supporting claims, Eric continues his argument by discussing medicinal effects of Schedule I and II controlled substances to back up his major claim. In response to his second claim, he discussed medicinal qualities of cannabis. He referenced David Nutt's article that stated cannabis can be used to self-medicate, to improve sleep, stimulate appetite, and reduce anxiety. This article also states that cannabis includes potential harms such as lung disease, schizophrenia, and addiction. It is up for debate whether the medicinal effects are worth the potential risk, and if the harmful effects were Eric proves that cannabis has medicinal benefits by providing sufficient research, but does not mention the extent into which these benefits possess long-term effects. Those whom seek for legalization of cannabis typically claim that the drug is harmless, yet it is still categorized as one of the most dangerous illegal drugs. According to Robert Booth, a psychiatry research that states when the study is all said and done, we will know a whole lot about the effects of marijuana. Therefore, it is not definite about the effects of marijuana, and there needs to be more research to prove these claims. For his third claim, he discusses psychedelics, in particular MDMA and acid. MDMA, also known as ecstasy, is discussed. In Eric's argument about psychedelic drugs, he provides research to prove his major claim. This argument is logical since he claimed illegal drugs have medicinal benefits. MDMA is a drug, therefore it has medical benefits. This argument is unsound. It fails to mention how dangerous the drug is and the addictive properties. According to Medscape.com, MDMA has a wide misconception that the drug is safe, despite the fact that the toxicity is unpredictable. and abuse of the drug has led to many ER visits. Eric referenced research on how MDMA reduces fear response, allows the users to interact, and promotes love and forgiveness. It's properties like these that serve as a motivator to the general public to use the drug. The effects are poorly understood. There is some evidence that MDMA induces social behavior in animals and increases sociability in humans. Eric's use of evidence is subjective. It fails to mention that most of the research is conducted with rats. LSD and magic mushrooms is another drug that he mentioned. Eric stated that LSD was very successful when alleviating cluster headaches. When reviewing his example, I found that the people who were chosen from the study were recruited from a website called clusterbusters.com, which is a non-profit organization that credits their research by the effectiveness of treating cluster headaches with psychedelics. This shows how the participants of the research could have been biased and already have the presumption that the headaches would be alleviated by the drugs. The conclusion of this piece of evidence also states that LSD and psilocybin, which are the magic mushrooms, may have certain benefits, but I believe the warrant is biased. For his final claim, he mentions both heroin and cocaine, but uses one single source to back up his information. The last supporting claims discuss how medical benefits of heroin and cocaine from referencing one single source, which was a YouTube video. The source is questionable, and there's possibly a possibility of a generalization, since only one source is used to credit both drugs as medically useful. His source was a YouTube podcast that featured Dr. Carl Hart, a Columbia University professor, and the star of the show, Joe Rogan. This is a reliable source, but is potentially biased and is also difficult to retain information since there is no text, it was only a video. In conclusion, Eric had a lot of information about illegal drugs and how it has been shown to be effective in treating medical issues. I do agree with Eric. After researching the different illegal drugs, the controlled substances do have medicinal qualities. However, instead of discussing a controversy, he states facts and makes his speech informative. As I mentioned earlier, there are a few flaws in the way the argument was structured and how evidence was interpreted.
All right, well, you start off with an organizational structure that kind of mimics what the advocate's talking about. That seems okay. There's an argument about the Controlled Substances Act, and you say that there's an inaccurate description of what's going on in the Controlled Substances Act since there's an annual revision that makes allowances or changes for research that's being done. You at least cite some technical information in the Act. I didn't hear any particular information about what drugs have been adjusted, added to, taken off the list, what treatments have been added to the list in the time since 1970. So although under the Federal Register the rules exist here for making those adjustments, there's not really much demonstration that any such adjustment has ever taken place, and I think that's a little problematic. And then you've got this whole explanation about how it's a legal issue concerning prosecution by law. I don't even know what you're talking about with that particular point. It sounds like some kind of obscuring statement as opposed to an explanation about how the law is really effective at producing the desired outcome. And then there's a discussion about how this is really a UN issue and not a US issue. And again, it wasn't clear to me if this was talking about a particular piece of evidence that the advocate talked about, or if you were saying that there's something that the Controlled Substances Act is based on a UN classification and not a US classification. I didn't quite understand what the point was that you were making on that issue. On the second point, the third point, and even on the fourth point, there's a lot of argument about what the medical benefits would be, and you seem to be consistently acknowledging those medical benefits. At the end of the speech, you make a claim that says that he's really making an informative presentation and not an argument, since he's just listing factual data here and he doesn't make any inferences. If you had said that at the beginning of those arguments, it would make this a lot clearer what it was that you were trying to say about those particular points. Because sometimes it just sounded like we're getting a list of what the potential benefits and disadvantages are repeatedly. If you're saying that he's not making an inference, he's just describing what is true about those things, and the inference is that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, but he never follows through on that. That's, I think, a claim that you could be making. At the end of the speech, though, like I said, to me, there's this extra argument that exists here, that this is not really an argument. But I didn't know that as you were presenting this, why I'm getting all this information, and then I have to go back through and look at it and say, okay, well, maybe I can see there's an application there. That would just be so much clearer if you did it at the beginning of the speech. All right, thank you.